everyone, and welcome back to my channel. It has been a long time, so watch the intro if you don't know who I am. My name is Jenna Van Mourik. I'm an inspired writer and an inspirational fiction reader who reads, writes, and lives for Jesus. If you hear any strange noises, it's probably my dog, who doesn't do any of those things, but is still very cute. So basically, I moved, if you can't tell. I'm in my new office. I have my rainbow bookshelves behind me. I think they're pretty snazzy. But what this does mean is that my posting schedule is over. Why are those days over? It is simply because since I moved, my school has really gotten crazy. I'm still in college, I'm still studying, trying to get a degree, doing all that stuff. I'm still looking for a job, I'm still moving in. It may look all put together right here, but I promise you if you turn the camera around, there's still a giant pile of cardboard boxes right over there. So, yeah, but I did want to pop on here and film some videos because I really don't like not posting to YouTube. YouTube is like my favorite social media. Instagram is great. I love Instagram, but YouTube is just my favorite. I love connecting with you guys through YouTube, and that's just kind of where my passion is. Since things are still going crazy, I thought I would do something really fun and simple, which is a Q&A. I asked you guys on Instagram for some Q&A questions a while back, and I saved those for later. And then a couple days ago, I asked you guys to do a Q&A specifically about my WIP book series. And I answered most of those on my Insta stories, but I thought I would kind of re-answer them here just so I can articulate some of my answers more as well and also create content. So let's get started. All right, let's get into the questions. Do you have any events in your life that are reflected in your book? And the answer to that is yes. And before I go on, let me just preface this with I'm writing a book series, and here's a little image for what the series is about. It is a biblical fiction novel set during the time of Christ about one girl and her life experiences and how her life is changed by knowing Jesus. Specific events, I don't really think so. Not anything like specific. I'm trying to think like what actually did I write? A lot of the characters in my book are inspired by my own family members and my own friends and people that I know in real life. They're not meant to be the same as them. Just in case you're one of my friends reading the book and you're like, that doesn't sound anything like me at all. It's not meant to be you, but there are some things taken from people that I know that are inspired. I guess one of the things that is really directly reflected in my biblical fiction novel is this. So in my WIP, and specifically just historically in ancient Israel and stuff, families and large extended families tended to all live in the same house. So that's reflected in my WIP. My main girl, her name is Shamira. She lives in a house. There's a first floor to the house, a second floor, and then there's a rooftop. And her whole family lives in this house in the various floors and rooms that are in it, and it's in the center of Jerusalem. So she is extremely close to all of her cousins, her aunts, her uncles. They all live there. And I think that is me. That is very self-insertion right there. I am super close to my cousins. We don't all live in the same house. But my family is pretty large, I guess you could say, but we're all very close together and we're very connected. But I grew up with my cousins and we all grew up together essentially, and there's just something about cousins that's really fun. And yeah, so that's, oh, and then, so my main girl, Shamira, one of her quirks that makes her kind of a funny character is her nose. She is very, she hates her nose. And that is something that when I was in high school and kind of a teenager, I was also very insecure about my nose. I don't really like the shape of my nose. I think it's kind of weird. I've learned to enjoy my nose, but she's very insecure about her nose, which is kind of a random fun fact, but it makes sense if you read the novel, which you can't yet, sorry. But yeah, that is something that is in my book. I'm sure if I went through and like was reading it, I could be like, yeah, that happened and that happened. But those are the two things that come up to mind. The next question is the hardest chapter to write. And the hardest chapter to write, okay, so my first book that I wrote, it's a series, like I said, but the first one is the life of Christ. And I think the hardest chapter to write was writing the crucifixion scene. And this was very difficult just because that is such a, not even just like a difficult moment in art and in media, but just such a strong, powerful moment in history and in the Bible. And it's heartbreaking, and it's hard to kind of translate that to paper. So I ended up having to skip that scene and write the rest of the book and then go back and kind of strengthen it. Still need to strengthen it because it is the shortest chapter in my whole manuscript, and I want that chapter to have more depth and more substance to it, but it is so difficult to write something with that kind of gravity and that kind of weight to it. The theme that you want the reader to take away. The first book, the theme is redemption, and that no one is any less than any other person, and that no one is any greater than any person. When Jesus Christ came, he died for all of us, not just for the good people and not just for the bad people. He came for all people, not just the rich, not just the poor, if that makes sense. That's a big theme throughout the novel. I would say just, yeah, a lot of that kind of forgiveness and redemption, which is also the theme of the second book, but in a different capacity, if that makes sense. There's so many facets and things to salvation that, you know, each book kind of reflects on one specific part of that, if that makes sense. But overall, the theme of the whole book is, and the whole series, is just faith and salvation and how it's for everyone. Do you have a favorite chapter? Yes! My favorite chapter is by far the very first chapter, which is kind of a prologue, I would say, I guess, but it's also just important. Do not diss prologues. Prologues are amazing and they're important. I'm not even calling it a prologue anymore because I've split that book into parts. So there's part 1 and part 2, which basically means that part 1 takes place when my main character is much younger, and part 2 takes place when they're much older, if that makes sense. So part 1, my two main characters meet as children in the first chapter, and there's something about just the way that they meet that is so pure because they're kids and they just kind of meet and they say what they think, and they don't have to worry about kind of how we worry when we're older about how what we're saying comes across. They just say what's on their mind and they say what they think. And there's something really powerful, I think, about kids who just can say whatever they want and have confidence in it and be like, yeah, well, I believe in Jesus. And, you know, when they get older, you know, there's a lot more politics to it. There's a lot more social problems with that because, you know, there were persecutions that happened. Christians were not very well liked. And so it complicates things, but when they meet as children and they both share this kind of conviction, they can just talk about it and they say what they think, and they're unfiltered and they're free and they're carefree and they're kids, and there's something just really, I don't know, really moving in that, but also very like adorable and cute and sweet, and I love it. What book would you compare your book to? I've been told my general idea for the series is very comparable to the Mark of the Lion series by Francine Rivers, which I have not read. It is definitely on my list because everyone says if this is what you want to write about, you need to read Francine Rivers' Mark of the Lion series because that is the pinnacle. I would probably compare the style of it more to like Connelly Cassette's writing, because her writing isn't about a biblical character specifically. It's about real, like, well, not real, it's about just normal everyday people who experience biblical events, and that's kind of something that I play with in my book series as well. Let me go just double check my bookshelf. I lied. There is a book that I would definitely say if you think that you'd enjoy the themes in my novel, then you would enjoy this novel. However, I do want to say that like my writing style is not nearly as good. My writing currently, not style, just my writing in general, is not nearly as good as Tessa Afshar's writing. Her writing just kind of blows my mind and it's incredible and I love it. But in terms of like the story idea, I would definitely say it's very similar to Land of Silence by Tessa Afshar, which is an amazing book. You need to read it. It will change your life. Okay, the next question is the hardest character that I had to write. Ooh, this is interesting. This is very interesting. Well, I mean, oh. Okay, so, no. So my main character is really annoying. She is a lot like me, but she's difficult to write because she's very complex. She is scared of a lot of things, but she's also very confident. And she is very timid sometimes, but she is also always usually getting herself into trouble because she is very outspoken. So she's kind of a bundle of contradictions, and that makes her difficult to write because I really want people to understand her in that, you know, and like, okay, so here's kind of how I relate to that is I'm very shy just on the inside, but I'm also very extroverted. I'm very much an extrovert. I love to like get out and talk to people and meet all the people and hang out with all the people, but I'm extremely shy and I don't really like going out very much. But when I am out, I am completely energized by it. So that's kind of where I get by on calling myself the introverted extrovert. But Shamira, my main character, is that kind of bundle of contradictions. So that's kind of difficult because I want people to understand that that kind of conflict represents the conflict within herself, that she doesn't yet have the confidence or the faith that she needs to have by the end of the novel. And then another hard character to write is, well, her name is Libby. I don't think I've introduced you guys to Libby yet, but Libby is the youngest of all the cousins in Shamira's family, and Shamira, being the oldest, kind of has a very special bond with Libby because Shamira's the oldest and Libby's the youngest, and they kind of just, they go together. But Libby is deaf and mute. Writing for her was also very challenging, and I think writing more of her now as I'm like continuing to edit and then work on the sequel has helped me kind of get a better understanding of her. But in the first book, obviously, she's much younger because she's a very little girl in the first book, and it was kind of difficult to like capture how she would see things and perceive things from her perspective. So that was something that was very difficult to write. Lesson you learned about faith. Lesson you learned about faith, trait, or yourself. I think that's one question. I'm not sure, but lesson I learned about faith is definitely this book has kind of made me a sort of guru on the Gospels and on the Book of Acts, because I've had to read them over and over again to kind of get an idea of the story and where I'm going with it, and then how the scripture is woven into the story and how the history and the context of it is woven into the story. So that's been something that, it's not really like a faith lesson, but it's something that I didn't really understand before, or I understood some of, but now I have a greater grasp on that. And then something I guess I learned about myself that I really love to write. Okay, why did you decide to break my book into parts? So the first book, like I said, is broken into 2 parts, technically 3 if you count the epilogue as being its own section. And that is because I have a major time jump. In between the first part of the book and the second part of the book, we skip 10 years. Obviously the characters meet when they're children, and then when the real story kind of picks up, they are young adults. Yeah, I wasn't gonna write 10 years of life story, obviously. It's important in the context that they meet when they're kids and they have an experience as kids, which will translate to their adulthood and then cause them to act differently and do things differently when they are adults. So that is why. Just because there's a portion where they are children and there is a portion where they are adults. And the portion where they're children is like this long and the portion where they're adults is like this long. So that's why. Do you have a favorite character? Yes, I do. My favorite character, well, I have a lot of favorite characters. Well, one of my favorite characters is obviously Shamira, my main character, my main girl. She is just really spunky, and she's the teenager I wish I would have been. In that she has more confidence than I did at that age, and she's very passionate and has this deep conviction about her beliefs and who she believes Jesus Christ to be. And you know, as teenagers in this world, we can all have that deep conviction, but the difference between having a deep conviction and having, you know, something more is whether or not you're willing to say something about it. And she is very vocal, and she says something about it, which is unusual for her time completely, because at that time in the Bible, you know, women weren't really respected, and it was a crazy time for women to be alive. We'll just say that. So she's just very confident. She doesn't really care that society thinks that what she thinks is unimportant. She feels so strongly that it is important that she is willing to sometimes get herself into a little bit of trouble for the purpose of her faith. Another favorite character would be Asa, who is her love interest, because he is so wise beyond his years. Something interesting about Asa is obviously in love with Shamira. They meet as children. He's been in love with her since the moment he saw her, and it's just so cute. But he is also super complicated because his dad is a member of the Sanhedrin. If you know the story of Jesus, then you would know that that presents a problem, because he believes so strongly in Jesus's message, but his dad believes so strongly in the opposite. And it is obviously because of, you know, the Sanhedrin, who were so not appreciative, shall we say, of Jesus Christ and his message and his gospel and his truth, that they, you know, colluded with Rome to have him executed. So that creates such a conflict for him, and it just makes him kind of age very quickly. He's much older in here than like he is in real life. And he's just very funny and very witty also, and he's really cool. And then of course I also have, in my second book, which I haven't told any of you guys about, the sequel, there is a Roman soldier in it who starts off being very hateful and wanting to kill everyone, and then is compelled by the message of Christ to kind of change his life. So there's something very complex about him that I love as well. I really like complex characters, can you tell? Okay, age range for my book series. I think a lot of YA, the older side of YA, would probably really enjoy it, at least the first book. There's nothing like inappropriate in it. So it's like pretty good for, I would say, high school aged. Maybe if I was in high school, I would have loved reading a book like this. I don't know if high schoolers really like biblical fiction, but I would say that a high schooler could really enjoy it, and then from there, you know, up. It's kind of an all appropriate, all age kind of story. I hope that answered your question. It's not middle grade though, and it's not a children's book. It is definitely a little bit deeper, I guess. It has a lot of, not that middle grade books don't have substance. My shelves are covered in middle grade books. I love middle grade, but it is a little bit older, so a middle grade student probably wouldn't enjoy it, because there's a lot of, you know, love stories and marriage and I don't know, when I was in junior high, I thought marriage was gross. So somebody else asked, have you got a cover in mind? I don't have a cover in mind. Ah, wait, that's a lie. So obviously I don't know if I'm going to traditionally publish or self-publish yet. That is something I really need to start thinking about as I'm editing and polishing my manuscript. But when I think about what I want my cover to look like, because again, if I self-publish, I'm in charge of that, but if I traditionally publish, it's up to a cover designer to kind of discover what would be most marketable in terms of, you know, how my story is and who it would appeal to and what kind of visual references that appeal to those kinds of people. When I think about what I think about my cover as being, I kind of really love this book cover, A Lineage of Grace by Francine Rivers. And then also Return to Me by Lynn Austin. And these are kind of the two covers that when I think about what I want my book to look like, I think about these ones, mostly because I love how this one is silhouetted. I really like that. I like the silhouette. I just think that's really interesting. And I like that the sky and the sunset in the background, or sunrise, I guess it could be. I think it's a sunset, I don't know, is kind of the focal point. And then in this one, I also love how the model is walking away from us, so we don't really see her face, and I don't really like faces on book covers. That's just a personal thing. But something I do also like about this cover is that as she's walking away, you can kind of tell who she is, because obviously she's in a field and she's carrying wheat, I believe that is. So you can kind of determine, oh, this must be about Ruth. And it's a compilation of stories actually, but Ruth is one of those that is included. And I would kind of love to see, when I think about my first book, which a pivotal moment in the first book is Palm Sunday, I would love to see a model portraying my main character, Shamira, facing away from us, because I don't like faces, and maybe holding a palm branch, because Palm Sunday is kind of the catalyst for the story, in that she's there during the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem on the donkey, and that's like important. And then, you know, her family, they're a family of shepherds, so maybe some sheep in the distance would be kind of cool and interesting to see. But I don't have a book cover. I do, however, just for fun, on the covers and at the front pages of my manuscripts, I do have some placeholder images that I've made that aren't really a cover per se, but they're kind of just for me to have, like, this is my book, which I guess if I'm gonna show you that means I also have to reveal my tentative working title. Nah, I'm gonna wait and do that, sorry. Have you plotted the series for your WIP? If so, do you know how many books it will be? I have plotted it mostly. I have a detailed outline for obviously the first book and a detailed outline for the second book. And then I have a very brief outline of the potential third book. So if, you know, if I publish them all, it will be a trilogy, and that's it. Any other books are gonna have their own spin-off series, because this series is a trilogy, as far as I'm concerned. Technically, it's a duology, and then the third book would be a prequel, if that makes sense, or I could publish them in order. I don't really know how the future is going to go, but when I think about my series, I think about it as a duology and then with a prequel. To explain the duology, basically the first book takes place during the life of Christ, and the second book takes place during the book of Acts and the Acts of the Apostles. If I write the prequel is going to be about the birth of Christ, because hint hint, if you didn't catch that when I was talking about it, my main characters are from a family of shepherds. And what do shepherds possibly have to do with the birth of Christ? So that would be a really fun story to write about, but it would probably be honestly a shorter story than the other two books, but we'll see if I ever get there. And then the next few questions I've already answered on my Insta stories a couple of days ago. I don't know how many days ago that was actually for you guys if you're watching this. Answer them here as well, just so I can kind of expand upon them, because there's only so much you can say in an Insta story reply. Can you maybe give us a hint of which Bible characters it's about? Like I said before, it's not really about any Bible characters specifically. However, a biblical figure that is featured predominantly in the first book is obviously Jesus, and a biblical figure featured predominantly in the second book is Paul, the Apostle Paul, formerly known as Saul of Tarsus. You may have heard of him. What made you want to write a Bible story? Like I said in my initial response, I was very much inspired by my family and by like the faith that we share, and my cousins, and just the closeness, and we're all super close, and I do really attribute that completely to our faith and just how we're all so connected through our faith, and that's what keeps us together and keeps us strong as a family. So that was something that kind of inspired me. And when I think about my family and how I would love to write a story of people who have such strong faith, I couldn't really think of a story that would work that way in a contemporary or a historical setting. And I was trying to figure out a story that I could write about a family who had incredibly strong faith and just had such strong conviction that they were willing to, you know, kind of just go wherever they were called based on that conviction. And when I thought about people with strong faith like that, I thought about the book of Acts and the first Christians and how these people were willing to be martyred for their faith. And that's kind of where I was initially inspired to write a biblical fiction novel. Inspiration behind the story and how did I feel called to write this particular story. So like I said, that was a lot of the inspiration for the story. And then specifically, when I began toying around with this idea, I had just gotten married and moved away, and I felt very alone and, you know, very confused, and a lot of those elements of confusion and anxiety do weave their way into my main character's life, Shamira. Like I said, she has anxiety about things, but she also is incredibly passionate about things, and it's interesting to watch that dynamic. But I was struggling with anxiety, and so I kind of wanted to write something that would kind of be almost a therapy for me to write. Just to write about, I guess I'm answering this really poorly, but also when I began to kind of think about, okay, so I immediately knew who my main character was. Shamira immediately was inside of my brain. She always has been for a few years now, since I started toying around with the idea of writing a biblical fiction novel about a family that was based on roughly my own family. Instantly, I knew who Shamira was. I knew what her name was. I knew what her life was, what her struggles were, but I didn't know when she lived. Was she alive in the Old Testament? Was she alive in the New Testament? Again, I had no clue if this was going to be a story about the Colosseum, if this was going to be a story about, you know, I had no idea. And so it was around Easter last year when I started to get really serious about wanting to make an outline for this story if I decided to write it. And it was Easter. There's a lot of imagery around Easter of the crucifixion. And I was watching The Miracle Maker, which is a stop motion film about the life of Jesus Christ. And instantly there is a line towards the end that just, bam, it was like a light bulb turned on. I went and got a notebook and a poster board and I outlined the whole thing, and that was it. And then I really didn't feel called to write this story until quite recently. I was writing it mostly for me and because I wanted to write it. And it wasn't until recently that I felt, you know, the Holy Spirit kind of working in me and saying, yeah, this want that you have to tell this story is from me, and you should keep pursuing this avenue, this line of, you know, writing and potentially publishing. And that was when I kind of had this moment of, wow, I feel legitimately called. Like, it's not just for me anymore. It's about so much more. It's about sharing this story with other people. So, do you have a title yet? I literally just said like a minute ago that I didn't want to reveal my titles, but I do have a title. And I do have mock covers for myself with my titles on them. They're working titles. Has it grown your relationship with the Lord? Yes, it has. Like I said, reading the Bible more and having to really study, you know, exactly why certain things that Jesus did were important, why something that he said fulfilled a prophecy and why that meant something, and why in the book of Acts, you know, certain debates happened and they were integral to early Christianity, has definitely exploded my knowledge, if you will. What has been the most fun part? Definitely writing the humorous scenes between my main characters, the love interests, obviously. I think when I write love stories, I like to make sure that there's a good amount of humor in them. For me, what I love most about my relationship with my husband is that we make each other laugh and that we're always there to make each other smile. So I think that translates a lot into the kinds of relationships that I write in my stories. Is that there's a lot of there's a lot of serious discussions and serious conversations and stuff, but there's also quite a bit of humor and wit, and wit is a good word for it. I don't think it's necessarily banter, but wit is one of my favorite parts is writing those moments where someone has like a one-liner and it's just like, haha! Reading all your answers to the questions, I'm getting so excited. Do you know if it will be published this year? And then I got a couple more questions about when will it be released? When can I read it? The answer to that is I really don't know. I feel called to write this story, and I definitely feel like the Lord wants this story to be written and wants it to be read by all of you and potentially others and reach people, and I definitely feel that very strongly. But I don't yet know if I'm meant to be traditionally published or self-published. I'm currently still praying about that and trying to get some direction about which avenue I want to pursue. If I could self-publish it, I would post it on the internet right now for you guys. You'd hate it because it needs to be edited and it's pretty bad, unedited. But if in a dream world, I would obviously share it with you all right now. But I don't know yet what the process is. And if I decide to do traditional publishing, it might not be for a really long time as I query and then try to get an agent and try to get a book deal and all the things that are intimidating. If you guys want to read this story, then what I would ask you to do is to then join me in prayer that an opportunity will open up, or that I will, you know, feel led in a certain direction, or that if I'm meant to be traditionally published, that a traditional publisher would pick up my story once I query it. So if you really want to read this story, then the best thing that you can do is just pray for its success and pray that, you know, the editing goes smoothly, that it becomes the best version of the story that it can be, and that eventually somebody wants to pick it up and distribute it, or that I, you know, will feel called towards self-publishing. Just kind of, if you want to read the story, then just pray for me. That's all I'm asking, basically. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I know this was a really long video, a super casual, super chill video also, and I know it's not in the posting schedule, like I said, but I really appreciate you guys for watching it. And just know that I really love all of you guys. You guys mean so much to me. Your support means so much to me. I genuinely can't even tell you how much I appreciate it. Remember, you can find me on Instagram. Here are all of my social media handles and links. I'm Jenna Van Mourik, once again, an inspired writer and an inspirational fiction reader who reads, writes, and lives for Jesus. You can find out more about me by visiting all the links in the description box below. And yeah, if you don't forget to hit the thumbs up button on your way out and hit subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you guys in my next video. If you have any video suggestions, again, leave them in the comments. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. You guys are all amazing. Go out there, read some books, write some words, live your life. I will see you in my next video. Bye!